Well, hello there. I'm Gemini. That battery can last up to 24 hours even with the always-on display turned on. It's pretty cool.
This wasn't just a market shift. It was a symptomatic collapse. Let's just start right there. Because what we're talking about with China's gasoline engine industry isn't some simple, neat transition. What we're looking at is a moment where a flawed national strategy, some really weird public psychology, and a totally broken industrial chain all just imploded at once.
So how in the world did this happen? Well, the very first thing you need to get your head around is that this was no accident. Not even close. This was a demolition, and it was absolutely deliberate.
Okay, so here's where it gets really fascinating. The fundamental strategy China chose, starting around 2015, wasn't just to, nurture the new EV industry. No. It was to actively kill the gasoline car industry. The goal was to force everyone into the new ecosystem. It was a strategy of coercion, not competition.
And boy, did the dominoes fall fast. The central government mandated this massive push into EVs. And almost overnight, all the investment, all the R&D funding for internal combustion engines, or ICE, it just vanished. Poof. So without any orders, that huge network of parts suppliers, the guys making pistons, valves, control units, they started going bankrupt. And just like that, decades of expertise just began to disappear.
So what's the result of all this? Well, in less than a decade, China created this massive technology vacuum. Their domestic ICE technology is now estimated to be a solid 10 to 15 years behind what Japan and Europe are doing. The government's strategy didn't just shrink the industry, it basically gave it a lobotomy.
But this story gets a lot more complicated. This wasn't just some top-down government plan. The public, the people themselves, played a huge part in this. The real question, though, is, was it really their choice?
This table really breaks down the cultural psychology of it all. Suddenly, gas-powered cars were seen as old tech, as liabilities that were just losing value by the day. But EVs? For a while there, they became speculative assets. People were buying them with subsidies not just to drive, but to flip them for a quick profit. The whole way people measured a car's worth shifted completely. It went from durability and reliability to superficial stuff like 0 to 60 times and how big the tablet was on the dashboard. For younger people, ICE cars became a symbol of the old regime.
So it's probably more accurate to say the public didn't just choose EVs, they were conditioned by government policy and social pressure to flee from gasoline cars, almost like they were abandoning a sinking ship.
And now we get to the most critical part of this whole story. This isn't just some temporary downturn that the industry can bounce back from. What we're looking at here is a permanent structural collapse.
And here's why it's pretty much irreversible. First, the supply chains that make all those critical ICE parts, they're gone. They're not coming back. Second, the generational transfer of knowledge from older engineers to younger ones, that's been completely severed. The experienced engineers got shuffled over to EV projects, and no new talent came into the field. Third, China never really developed its own top-tier emission control tech, so it can't export to places with strict standards. And finally, with the rest of the world also pushing for EVs, there's just no foreign market to escape to.
This whole concept of the dried-up river of talent is maybe the most tragic piece of the puzzle. You see, IC development relies on a constant flow of knowledge, passed down through generations of engineers. China basically just turned off the tap. For about 10 years, no new water flowed into that river, and now it's completely dry. You can't just restart something like that.
This brings us to our final point, and maybe the most dangerous consequence of all. This industrial collapse is no longer just an economic problem. It's actually becoming a direct threat to the stability of the regime itself. What a lot of people don't realize is that the IC industry supported this huge, diverse web of jobs. We're talking engine factories, yeah, but also countless small parts suppliers, millions of mechanics, gas stations. All of these were pillars of employment in smaller, regional cities. The EV industry? Well, it's way more concentrated, and it just employs fewer people overall. This has created a hidden, but very severe, jobs crisis.
So the crucial point is this. The collapse is wiping out the very foundation of China's regional middle class. And for decades, the political stability of the country has been built on a promise of prosperity for this exact group. By destroying their livelihoods, the regime is destroying its own support base.
This was a huge, high-stakes bet, and the risks are now coming into sharp focus. What happens when the massive EV subsidies are finally cut, triggering bankruptcies? What happens when battery material prices spike, or when there are power shortages? With the entire ICE industry gone, there is no safety net. It is an all-or-nothing gamble, and for the first time, the failure of this grand policy is becoming visible to the public.
Which leaves us with this one last question. China deliberately threw away its industrial safety net. They got rid of it in favor of a single high-tech bet. But what happens when that EV Highwire Act, balance on subsidies and global supply chains, inevitably begins to wobble?